it crushes your soul. It's so good for me to get out there and just get beaten. And I don't know any other pretty way to say it. Man, you remember those moments where you were so depleted. Okay, you take some breaths, you take a minute, you recollect your thoughts, your mind recenters, you're reinvigorated, you keep rallying. And I welcome that. I want to be in areas where I feel pressure.
Top leaders, meaningful conversation, actionable advice, bulldoze complacency, ignite inspiration, create impact. Produced by Southwestern family of companies. This is the Action Catalyst.
Welcome back to the Action Catalyst. Today we are joined by Ron Alford, a senior partner, VP of Recruiting, executive coach, and speaker at Southwestern Consulting. It's awesome to have you back on the podcast. You've been with us before. I am excited to formally interview you because you're trapped and I can ask you all the embarrassing things publicly that I've always wanted.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
But in all honesty, one of the things that I've always respected about you and how you've lived your life outside of business is, I guess, first and foremost, in how you run. My first experience learning about you, I remember, was when you talked about how you just run 35 miles 1 year for every year you've been alive because it was your 35th birthday. I was both amazed and thought you were a masochist at the same time. But then when you unpacked, why you did it, what it meant to you, I thought that was really cool. But talk to me about, when did running start for you?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing how gut feelings happen. I remember walking into a running store to just get some shoes, not thinking much of it. My whole life was basketball, football, just more team sports. And I saw this fundraiser for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society where you can do a triathlon. You can go to Kona, Hawaii with a group of people you don't know and raise, it was about, I believe it was $6,500 to go to Hawaii and do this triathlon, this Olympic distance triathlon. And I didn't have a bike. I didn't, really run other than to score a basket or a touchdown and I just thought, man, that'd be neat. I was, getting a little older and team sports weren't the thing anymore. And I remember fundraising for that and falling in love with the whole philanthropic side of what we were doing there, but then also the actual race itself and the endurance side of it and just really what it took to prepare there. And so after doing the race, I thought, the biking was cool, the swimming was cool, but man, the running part was awesome. And so that started a series of like, okay, well, let's see what these half marathons and these things are like. And finally got into some trail stuff where you're not as consumed with the watch. You can't really, when you're going up a mountain or doing technical single track, you can have an 18-minute downhill mile. That changes everything. So that's kind of where the running part started and how I've more fallen in love with the distance endurance side of it.
And to date, roughly how many ultras have you run?
So in actual events, roughly 20. Things I've done more on my own, I'd say 35, 40.
How does running fit into your book, Redefining Possible? Where do you feel like how the psychology of how you do what you do? Because for listeners that don't know, how long is a typical ultra?
Anything typically 50K or above. So anything technically longer than a marathon, longer than 26.2. So 50K is 31 miles. But the thing about ultras is they are usually in mountains or deep trails, or they're not your typical road kind of terrain. Obviously the book, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but it alludes to belief barriers. It alludes to unconditional confidence, and running humbles any person. It crushes your soul. And so it's so good for me to get out there and just get beaten. And I don't know any other pretty way to say it. Man, you remember those moments where you were so depleted, your legs were shot, you could hardly move, the cramps were in. Okay, you take some breaths, you take a minute, you recollect your thoughts, your mind recenters, and suddenly your body follows your mind. 10 miles later, you're eating snacks, you're reinvigorated, you keep rallying. I would say the other part of it is just in a world where if you're in business, if you have, multiple kids like I do, I'm in a blended family, we all have stress environments. And I welcome that. I want to be in areas where I feel pressure. I want to be in areas where I feel stress. I think that's a healthy thing if I don't let it get to me too much. And that's where the running really helps me calm. I come home from a run. I'm a better listener to my kids. I'm more calm with more loving to my wife. I'm more patient with prospects or clients, you name it.
Yeah. I've noticed, I think that's a common trait. A lot of people who've found business success is that a number of them, not all, but a number of them found their ability to manage controllable actions on a physical level. Arnold Schwarzenegger going to the gym and knowing all the reps and see the results from the reps you put in. You control your body, and the results are an extension of that.
Absolutely. And yeah, Schwarzenegger's story. So, he talks about how that fitness aspect helped him in the world of acting and becoming, arguably the top actor of his time. And then in the world of politics. And so I can't agree more. It blends into every part of life. And it doesn't matter if it's extreme weightlifting like Arnold or running or whatever the person's thing is, but it's finding that.
In prior interviews, we focused on some of your earlier life and how you built into Southwestern Consulting and the impact that you've had there. I'm wondering, I guess, more recently through COVID and in these last few years, what are some lessons that you've taken back and thought about the work that you wrote in Redefining Possible and new applications, new inspirations that you've had just over the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, man, I love the question. I think for every listener, for each of us, like I really am more and more convicted on the seasons of life. It's crazy how I could have spoken with you 6 months ago on some of these concepts and today be in a totally different frame of mind. For listeners that are familiar with the book, the overriding theme is impact. And you cannot grow older. You can't go through things and not think about what is my legacy? What does significance really mean? We all know the dollars don't equal the joy. And yet it's still so easy to fall into that trap of whether it's more money, a new title at work, a better race time in my running, or whatever the carrot is going to bring that joy. Yet you and I both know, man, it just, the thing that's really going to fill that cup is the difference I believe I'm making in the lives of others. I think I could have known that maybe a few years ago, but I feel like I'm in a season now where it's like that is it. That is the medal. That is the thing that we're going after. And so if I believe that, then what am I doing in my life? What are my morning routines? What are my habits? Who's holding me accountable to where I can get the best out of what I've been given?
I've always seen you as a long-term thinker, but when you said recently there's been a reflection on legacy, go into that a little bit more. Like, how have you kind of reset legacy for yourself? Like, how have you started to reassess or refresh legacy and what's important to you?
Really, it's just more top of mind. And I wasn't planning to go here, but they have a recurring event every other Monday afternoon, Ron's Call with Mark Stacy. And Mark was a mentor for thousands of people and an impactor, as joyful of a person I've ever worked with and done life with. And I got to work closely with him. And for years, he and I had our recurring calls, and I got to go to Austin, Texas to travel with them and be with them. And Mark passed away, a little over a year ago now, incredibly unexpectedly. It just, you can't go through things like that. Every listener that's had a loved one go through a terminal condition or lost a loved one unexpectedly. And so for me, I actually keep that recurring event. It's still on my calendar. And I don't want to remove that because it's, as much as it can kind of make me sad for a moment, emotional, it also reminds me of like, if perspective is brought back instantly. I might be thinking, oh man, I'm behind on my goals, right? I'm this or I'm that, or woe is me, or gosh, our profit margin is a little off, and then it's like, come on, stop. And perspective comes back instantly. And so trying to have those kind of reminders in my life daily where it's more top of mind.
Yeah. And I think you have this ability to hold things loosely. Like maybe you even said this analogy years ago, and I probably heard it from you, but if you grip sand too tightly in your hand, it slips through your fingers. If you cradle it, it's the only way to hold it. I think that might have been you. But I hear that I almost in that story where it almost like that partly reminds you to hold some of the things that maybe we think are important and hold it loosely instead, because it's not as important as that perspective.
Yeah, it's just, even as a parent, you hold your kids alive. It's hard to not squeeze their, my kids are going to get good grades, they're going to be respectful, they're going to look people in the eyes, and they're going to greet people well, they're going to be little athletes, and et cetera, good with music and art. And so you just like, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to have a ton of faith. I'm going to lead by example, and I'm going to hold those things loosely. Otherwise, I put so much pressure on my dang kids, they turn into a little monster.
Exactly, yeah. Control what you can and don't try and control things that you can't. I love that. Another question would be, of some of the principles that you bring up, Redefining Possible, what's another one, I guess, that you really have been focused on here over the last year or two?
I'm really into focus because I think when you're juggling things, think of the wheel, the spokes of the wheel, right? And I've got my spiritual goals. Like for me, my faith is the beginning and the end, right? It's the center. Obviously, my role as a husband, my role as a dad, my business role, with internal clients, all of our coaches and company, external clients. So you have all these things on your plate that I've chosen. So that's the ownership piece. This isn't oh my gosh, look at all, this is like, thank goodness I made these choices. So I'm fully owning it. But the focus piece is big. And just even as I talk to you, looking down, making sure my phone is upside down. There's no lighting, there's no notifications. My computer screen, man, no way would there be a notification pop up that would somehow take a little bit of my momentum or my inertia or my focus away from our conversation. Just the blinders. I'm more and more and more fascinated with that concept. And I love studying it with people, learning from people that just, no matter how much they have on their plate, whenever I'm with them, they really seem present and engaged. I would say one last part of that is because, again, two of my three kids, my twin boys, they're literally just about to getting their driver's licenses. And so it's like, man, I don't have a ton of time with my kids at home. I want to have focused time with these kids. I want to make sure the time I have with my wife counts. I want to make sure the time I have with my coworkers counts. You get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of focus, writing a book takes a lot of focus. I mean, to get your ideas on paper and not even second guess yourself, it's really difficult. And so maybe there's a couple questions around just writing and putting these ideas on paper. What was the best way for you to focus on writing that book?
Yeah, I look back now. So I would say there was kind of three phases. The first was just a loose over a couple years, loosely having notes of Ron's Rambles, I call them. And it was just little rambles, little thoughts, little things I wanted to study. I had no idea what I wanted to do with them. Maybe it'd be a blog or a video or part of some different keynote speaking things or a book. But that was just a number of years of just kind of collecting thoughts and pondering and just almost journaling and writing and processing it. That was absolutely the first part. The second was getting myself in a room and kind of organizing the thoughts into something that made sense. Like, if I'm beginning with the end in mind, what does the finished product look like? What do you want readers to take away? If no one read it except my three kids and maybe their spouses someday, would they be proud of their dad? If this is like my journal or some sort of a way to process part of my life and part of the things I believe deeply in, essentially what I'm devoting my professional life, but even a lot of my personal life to, if I can get this organized on paper, will my kids be proud of it? That was the second part that was more of an intense focus of getting it all arranged. The third part was evenings where I had help and had a bit of a team that would, from 6 to 8 p.m. And thankfully my wife was awesome. She said, hey, you have total permission to take that time at night. Just, so it was 2 to 3 hour segments at night where I would grab a bite of dinner with my family. And then by 6 or 6:15, be back in my office. And it was just book work time from like maybe 6 to 8, 8:30. And then be able to kind of relax a little bit with my wife and family before bedtime. So just more spurts, 2 to 3 hours, a couple nights a week.
Well, I always get in a place where I question whether I'll still think what I'm putting down is important 5 or 6 years later. You now have this perspective. I guess coming back and adding some highlights to the book. When you wrote it, I guess, how did you know that this was going to be something that you'd read again 5 years later and go, oh yes, I still believe these things. It's still important to me.
Yeah, I think just anything that's principles, like to me, trends come and go, right? Fads come and go. 30-day diets and clothing styles. I have a lot of old pictures of clothes that sure are not in style, right? But principles are just, they're the rock. I really believe the character traits that I want to be known for, the character traits that I wanted this book to be about, and the principles I wanted to be centered on, and really the principles that represent Southwestern. This isn't my book. I worked hard to put a lot into it, but this is stuff that thankfully Southwestern has given me over 30 years. And so that was really important as well, is that making sure anything we really dove into was things that were going to last. Things like vision, right? Having a purpose for one's life is not a come and go topic. It's been since the beginning of time and will always be, right? Things like belief systems and really rewiring thoughts and being hyper aware of the thoughts running through my head and how do I reframe beliefs and not let my story go into a negative way. Those are principles that are going to be truths, right? I call them truths versus lies. I unfortunately, like any human, pick up on a lie frequently and my mind starts doubting and feeling blame and feeling worry and anxiety. But these are truths that bring my mind back to center.
I love that.
Yeah, then we just wanted a fun mix of, some personal stories, of course, and examples, but then a lot of his history, right? We learn from history. So a lot of historical, whether it's data and studies and actual case studies, but history that kind of backs up a lot of these principles and how important they are to our lives.
100%. Yeah, I love that. There are a lot of listeners that probably haven't had a chance to pick up the book yet. I know you said you wrote it with even your own kids in mind, like would they be proud of you? But in the world of business and the people that are listening in here, who did you write this book for? Like, who are the people that are going to pick this up, read it, and go, gosh, that's exactly what I needed?
Well, clients were top of mind through a lot of this. And a lot of them are in sales. A lot of them are in leadership. They lead small teams. Some of them lead small teams. Some of them lead companies. But at the end of the day, they're people that struggle with time. How do I plan my time more effectively? How do I manage my time more effectively? How do I have boundaries? And there are people that struggle with the emotional side of being people pleasers or being control freaks. So definitely the clients internally and externally. So I mentioned that earlier is, for us, when we hire coaches, they have this tremendous background. Just because you've got a brilliant resume and all these accolades and all these certifications doesn't mean you don't get humbled daily. We'll put it that way. So I wanted this to be something that are tools for our coaches that we could help coach on, but obviously for our clients and again, stuff that people can use, not just in the boardroom, but things they could use when they go home with their own children or when they have their own routines or their own quiet time where they're wrestling with their thoughts. So that was who it was written for.
I think you really do exemplify what you write about. There are not many people who are able to show up at home and at work and live out things as much as you do. And you've done a really good job being a living example. Just for our back end of time, I wanted to do a little lightning round of questions for you. This is kind of a fun question I ask a lot of folks we interview. Who is a person you always wanted to meet but never have?
My mind, it's funny. I go to Troy Polamalu first. If listeners know who that is, like Google him or whatever, as a long time, 45-year Pittsburgh Steelers fan, that's one part of it. But way aside from that, he is, from everything I've read, but the kindest, gentlest, calmest. He would literally pray before every play. And yet he was ferocious. Like if you go on YouTube and watch him, he was just he was crazy on the field and Pro Bowl after Pro Bowl, all defense, MVP, etc. So just crazy on the field, but yet he had a way of calming himself down. And the way he treated people was so unconditional. I just read about things he and his wife have done to impact people, and just a ton of admiration for Troy.
That's a really good one. The balance of humility and prayer with aggression that's appropriate.
Exactly.
What's something that significant, I guess, that you've actually changed your mind about recently, that you've had a change of mind about?
I think just right and wrong. It's hard to be around politics or just divisive things. And I'm more and more, and I don't know if I like this about myself, but I'm more and more becoming one of my coworkers that calls me Switzerland sometimes because I won't take a side at times. Now, obviously, there's certain things that convictions are like, come on, I have absolute principles and convictions I'll die for. I'm gonna dig in on certain things, and a lot of it I'm not gonna stake my flag on that. I'm not gonna act like that's the. I just think ego does these crazy things to us humans where we think we have to be right, which means they have to be wrong. And someone just as wise across the aisle is saying the same thing about you. And so just more and more and more, whatever the topic might be, just believing there can be some truth in both sides. How can we listen? And so it's just more and more not being quick to judge or quick to speak, but slower to ask questions and try to seek to understand. I don't know if it's a new principle, but it's something I have a higher conviction of lately than I did years ago.
So you embrace the moniker Switzerland.
I do.
Exactly.
While other countries are going at war, we're just like, hey, life's good. Like more wine, more cheese, more calm. Switzerland's happy.
Switzerland's just happy. What's the best piece of advice that you ignored intentionally, like, and you're glad you did? The one piece of advice that maybe you've received that you didn't take?
I think having to have data, pros and cons always have to be aligned. Like logic is going to win always. And just sometimes there is a gut. There's an art to, as a big baseball fan, You can see the analytical data studies where there's a lot of GMs that have baseball teams that
play ball stuff.
Yep, exactly. And so that's one thing where I believe in that. I love data. I love trends. I love studying analytics, and I believe there's absolutely a world of logic. And there's times where it's like, you know what? I'm going to trust my heart. Like there's something there that is true and pure. And I don't want to always be a slave to what the data says.
Really true. The pendulum swings sometimes, like in the tech sector, it swings all the way over to data-driven decision-making, but you could dig, your grave with the amount of data there is to sift through and analyze, and data at the same time ends up just being numbers. We know that tells a good portion of the story, but you can wrongly interpret data and unpack it incorrectly.
There is an art. I think it's the art and the science. Both are great things. And again, maybe that's the Switzerland in me, where it's like, it's not art or science, it's both.
What's your current morning routine?
Yeah. So, bathroom routine, come out, 30 seconds with my dog. I literally get on the steps and just literally hug my dog and like lay with him and just and then come down, feed the animals. And I come into my office and then I lay on my office floor. I do about a 15-minute stretching routine that just helps, some back situations and some stuff with my dog. So it's quiet time with my pooch where I'm stretching and relaxing, and he does his downward dog and his stretching. And then depending on the day, he either gets a quick walk and I go to the gym, or we grab the leash, which of course he goes crazy for, meaning we get to go for a run in the trails. That's absolutely the morning routine. Then it's back. By that time, my daughter's up and my wife's up and the kids are up and whatnot, and get to see the family and then kind of get ready and ready for the day. Nothing crazy.
Nope. That's perfect. And stretching, I think, is a big thing that I'm missing.
Yes. And I'll just quickly add to it, the physical side, of course. But it's way deeper. I believe the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, the mental, all four components, that helps me with. My shoulders drop. And even in the middle of the day, when anxiety or stress starts to add up, having a quick routine, maybe just after lunch or at the 2:00, 10-minute break or something where I can go out and kind of re-stretch in a way, maybe not the same as I did early in the morning. My breathing changes. The tone of voice, the calmness, like I said, the posture, I could have a neck issue, whatever. And so I think it really does get your heart right. So it's because I've stretched where my mind is in 18 different places and I'm scrolling apps and my mental side is not there and it's not nearly effective. But when I stretch with breathing and with calmness and with no distractions and just being there with my dog, there's something more. There's a deeper level of health that comes from it.
Have you ever hired like a trainer or a coach of some kind, like business or physical related, to like prepare for something?
Yes, not as much as I'd like to say I have. So I've hired some trainers to help with like even physical therapists, for example. Definitely have hired physical therapists, not reactionary because I've got an injury, but more proactively to help me with preventative things for my back or my hips or my knees, or, as I get older and if I'm training for a 100-mile race this August and I'm going to spend a lot of time, how do I proactively prevent injury versus reactively do it? So I've done a lot of that kind of thing for sure.
That's awesome. Probably a good analogy for business coaching too, is that so many people gravitate towards coaching or help when it's already not necessarily too late, but the problem's already become so painful that they're scrambling for a need. There's probably a lot of value to preventative maintenance in every area of your life, right? Do you really want, marital counseling when it's really, really needed, or do you want to get ahead of that, right? I mean, there's a lot of examples.
And in all seriousness, I cannot agree more. And it's painful to think of all the times I've made the mistake of the opposite. So let me not act in any way like I've been some proactive person my whole life. No way. Messed it up so much. But now it's like, I want to be able to do that training, but I also still want to play basketball with my boys every weekend. I want to be able to run with my daughter and do things and keep up with them. And it's getting tougher, but it's like, I still can rock one-on-one with my twins. And it's like, I want to be able to do that and not, when they have their kids, I want to be able to play with my grandkids someday. So there's some deep emotional, of course, that's back to the vision board type stuff, deep emotional purpose behind this that has sparked the action in hiring the PT on the front end.
Yeah. Oh, it's really cool. This has been a really insightful and energizing interview. Just been a lot of really great anecdotes and stories, things that I hadn't heard before. And I think our listeners are going to love hearing this, reading your book. And so on that last point, where can people find Redefining Possible?
Yeah. So of course, Amazon, any book selling places there. Our Southwestern websites, so southwesternconsulting.com or my own, or ronalfordswc.com. Any of those are good. Yeah, even on my Instagram or LinkedIn or those places, it has links for it.
Coaching, training, speaking, Ron does it all. You can find more info on those same places for that as well, right?
Correct. It's fun to learn with. I mean, that's why I love being a part of this, is we get to talk through stuff that's like, okay, I've got more focus and energy for my day. So thanks for having me on talking about all this.
Yeah, you got it, Ron. Appreciate the time.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. And to stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and on Twitter at Catalyst_Action. And thanks for listening.